Greetings, Taku Faithful. Thank you for joining me again this week. Once again, it's Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief, and I'm here to bring you all yet again another Game of Thrones episode review right here on Otaku Assemble Weekly. And as always, here to bring you the latest in this week's Game of Thrones episode review. Now, I know this may come to a surprise to many of you that I am actually streaming this live. However, my camera has been giving me fritz all evening, and I do not want to run the risk of being halfway through a 15 or 20-minute episode review and have the damn thing die on me and lose the whole thing and have to start all over. No, it's not happening. So in the immortal words of Bill O'Reilly, fuck it. We'll do it live. I'm doing it live. So anyway, I want to thank you all for joining me again this week, and this is going to be my review of Season 4, Episode 2, entitled The Lion and the Rose. Now, general thoughts on this week's episode. I found it to be awkwardly a very good episode. And I say awkwardly because the Purple Wedding was a very difficult scene to sit through. And I'll get into more detail about why in a few moments. But that was a very difficult scene to sit through. And there were a couple of other scenes that were pretty hard to watch. But despite that, I do like the fact that in the same approach as the premiere, all of our side stories featured characters that we have yet to see this season. It got us back on track, back up to pace with what they were doing. So now we're covered. Now we have a firm, brisk overview of exactly what every character in the story is doing up to this point. And I like the fact that the episode was laid with a bunch of intrigue and surprises. So taking all of that into consideration, despite the awkwardness of the Purple Wedding and despite one major disappointment, which I'll get to in about a minute, Stannis, overall, really good episode. Really good episode. So let's dive further into this episode. First thing I'm going to mention is that difficult thing I just mentioned. That's the first thing I'm going to talk about. Brief overview. Brief little glimpse. That's Stannis of the House Baratheon. I don't have much to say about Stannis because at this point in the story, he's the only character that from the premiere and from this episode has been doing the same thing. More or less the same. More or less the fanatical bullshit. And I'm sorry, but to say that the trailer led us to believe that Stannis was, he was going to be a man on the mission. He was going to have a purpose in this season. He was going to get it done, which he could very well still do. I mean, we have, 8 episodes left to go? But as of this episode, no. It's more of the same bullshit. So, I'm sorry, Stannis, but you are the major disappointment of this episode. Good day, sir. That's all the time you get from me. Now, second thing I want to talk about is pretty much all the side story arcs we got. First, I want to talk about Lord Bolton, Ramsey Snow, and what happened at the Dreadfort. That was one of the first big surprises of the episode for me. The fact that Bolton and Snow were not on the same page. I'm going to say Ramsey, because if I say Snow, I think a lot of people will get confused. They might think I'm referencing John, which I'm not. Okay, so as I mentioned, the first major surprise was the fact that Lord Bolton and Ramsey Snow were not on the same page, which I did not know that. We knew that he left Ramsey in charge. We knew that he sent them after Theon, and we knew that he was an authority in the North, but apparently they must have got their wires crossed because Ramsey, we saw in Season 3, turned Theon into his personal lapdog, captured him, tortured him, and now he's his own, beaten and broken servant. Bolton, on the other hand, wanted to use him as a bargaining chip with Balon Greyjoy. And even when Ramsey told him, hey, I reached out to him, he said he didn't want anything to do with it. Bolton's like, well, you didn't tell me? Don't you think I should have been informed? So that was the first main surprise. And Bolton even said it. He said, I made a mistake leaving you in charge. I expected too much of you. which really threw me through a loop, because it's like, did you not know what the boy was capable of? How did you not know that he would resort to this? But that's neither here or there. It looks like Bolton is still going. He still intends to use Theon as a bargaining chip, because he's sending Ramsey along with Theon to go and try to claim one of the territories that Balin took in. I think that's what they were talking about at the end of season 2, when Yara made her way to Winterfell, and she was talking about how they sort of how the Greyjoys sort of took over. What was it? I forget the name of the place, but anyway, they've been working their way slowly inland up north. And I think that's one of the major territories that Bolton wants back. You know, you can't really rule the north with that belonging to the Greyjoys. So I'll be real interested to see how that whole thing plays out, especially since I was under the impression that Yara would have gotten Theon by now, that she would have rescued him by now, but maybe not. All of that's going to come to a head fairly soon, I expect. Now, let me see. Okay, next thing I want to talk about is Bran. And this story, it does have a tad bit of disappointment, and I'll get to that in a minute. But this was definitely probably my favorite part of the episode, believe it or not. And I know a lot of you all will be surprised by that. No, what happened with Bran in this week's episode was my favorite part. And the reason why I say that is because, first off, I like what they did with Bran. As far as his condition at this point in time in the story. Bran, more or less, has been using his power as a comforting tool. He's been using it sort of as an escape from what's been going on around him. And that little tidbit of information actually resonated with me, because the thing was, I wrote a story once where I had a young character who had supernatural powers, and to escape the harsh realities of the conflict of said story, he used his supernatural power as an escape, and misused it, actually abused it, sort of like a drug. And so the fact that Bran is sort of doing that immediately stood out to me, and it stuck. I was like, yeah, because it makes sense. You know, any kid who's had to endure what Bran has, and who has an ability like that, just the idea that he finds solace in being able to travel freely through summer. You know, he can't do it on his own anymore. So just that idea makes so much sense, and it's so believable, and it, you know, it really hits home. But I love how what's the Reed boy's name? Jorgen? I think that's, yeah, Jorgen. I like how, you know, he warned Bran. He said, hey, be careful. You know, to abuse your power like that comes with some serious ramifications. And then, of course, the highlight of the scene is when Bran got the this real strange, like, I'm talking about this montage of visions. And that really intrigued me, because up to this point, when Bran's power was first being teased to us, we knew that he had the power of premonition, that he had foresight, that he could see things before they had happened, but it wasn't clear, because remember, during season 1, we still didn't know what Bran's power was. So that was the first thing. And then in season 3, we learned that, no, you're a warg. You know, you have the ability to see through the eyes of animals, and you can get inside their mind, and you can act through them. You can control them for that moment. And so that's when we started to get a bit more clarification. But the scene in which he touches that tree Now we've gone into so much different territory, because here's the thing. First off, we do have the premonition, because we see brief images of future events. We see images of past events. Okay, then of course there's the Wark thing, because we saw images, you know, with Summer and whatnot. But what got to me was the sort of clairvoyant telepathy that is teased in that montage, and the fact that there's a voice speaking to him. Now, yeah, I could take this quite literally as being maybe this is a voice inside Bran's head, but what really intrigued me was the possibility that this is another Wark talking to Bran. Think about that for a minute. Let that resonate with you, and feel free to comment on it as you're watching the stream. Think about that. The idea that another Wark could be talking, communicating to Bran. Now, see, that opens up a whole nother realm of possibilities. And that brings me to my disappointing bit about the scene, because it was also teased to us in season 1 that Rickon might have the same ability when he said that he saw Ned in the crypt beneath Winterfell. That he said, you know, Father, Robb, Catelyn, they're not coming back. Now, granted, it's never confirmed that Rickon has that ability, but just the possibility that he could, given what we saw in season 1, now that makes me really feel like Rickon should be with Bran, because it wasn't until that scene that I realized that Rickon isn't with him. And then I remembered season 3 ended with them separating. Osha and Rickon went elsewhere. If in fact all of that is true, I would have really wanted Bran and Rickon to take that journey together, to discover that together. You know what I mean? The brothers working together, collaborating together. And yes, Rickon is a young child, so a lot of this wouldn't occur to him. And then you have to really wonder how much of a role could he really play in that sort of quest? How much of an influence could he actually be? But that is something that those two brothers could have bonded over. You know what I mean? And we don't have it. We don't have it. Now, keep in mind, I do realize I could be reaching with this. I could be completely out of my gourd with all of this. But I am more so interested to see what happens with Bran now than I've ever been. I would probably say that this scene makes up for some of the lesser scenes in season 3. This is probably the most interesting scene I've seen with Bran since we learned that he was a Wark. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Now let me see. I mean that pretty much covers all the side stories, all the other story arcs, because the bulk of the episode took place in King's Landing, and I know everyone's been waiting for me to address this. So here we go. First off, I'm going to address the awkwardness of the Purple Wedding, because it felt like a joke that was running too long. Way too long. And it was really nerve-wracking having to sit through it, because no one lifted a finger to do a thing until we got our final punchline. Get it? Joke ran too long. Punchline. You see what I did there? Anyway. But, so the first thing I want to talk about in regards to the wedding is going to be the character relationships, because I loved how they illustrated every main character's reaction and impression to what was going on during and after the wedding. First off, I love the scene with Lady Olenna and Tywin, because it was the two old folks, you know, shooting the shit. That was really funny. 15-minute marker. That was really funny. And I've been waiting for a scene like that for quite some time. I mean, I think we've had one like that before, but I've been waiting for something like that, because let's face it. I mean, you gotta imagine how Tywin and Lady Olenna deal with this stuff. You know what I'm saying? When their kids are running wild, you know, throwing a fit and whatnot. I'm talking about just fucking going ape shit. You gotta, I mean, we don't get inside their heads enough. And I'm sorry, but I can't help think that 99.9% of the time Tywin is sitting up there like, these fucking children, man. I'm serious. It has to drive him up a wall. So I do like that. Another thing I like is how that conversation, their little stroll, led to his meeting up with, well, no, it was actually Tywin and Cersei at that point when they met up with Oberyn. And once again, for any of you all who saw my review last week, and for any of you all who saw my hangout discussion for episode 1, I talked about the one thing I love about Oberyn is how he shoots from the hip. He doesn't mix words, and he doesn't do the subtle, you know. No, when he makes a point, when he has a point, he's gonna make it. And sure enough, his exchange with Tywin, that mixing of words, that subtlety, that underhanded sort of, you know, play nice for the time being lasted, I think, all of about 3 exchanges. And then that's when he said, hey, yeah, in my country, you know, we don't adhere to raping women or murdering children either. And I was like, oh, bam, shot from the hip. And you saw it on Tywin's face too. He was like, motherfucker. But I love it. And what I really hope is that this is not the only exchange we get between them. I'm sorry, but let's face it. If you remember what I said in last week's review, given Tywin what we know of him, what his status is, and the role he plays in this story, and Oberyn, what we know of him, what his status is, and what I hope the role he will play in the story, I want more interaction between them. I want more. And I'm waiting for that private exchange, not a public conversation, and not not having Cersei and what's your girl's name? Anyway, his companion, not having them there either. I'm talking about a closed door, private exchange of these two. It needs to happen. It needs to happen. So that's the first exchange I really like. The second I'm gonna mention is the twins and how that whole thing plays off. First off, side note, outside the wedding, I like the opening scene with Tyrion and Jaime, and I do have to talk about this for a minute because Tyrion. First off, I love that Bronn is now Jaime's new sword master. I love that, and I knew that's where Tyrion was going with this. But I like the fact that Tyrion made that offer to Jaime. Here's my thing. Very seldomly do I ever see a scene between the Lannister siblings that feels genuine, that feels legitimate. Tyrion offering to help Jaime, that was legitimate. That was genuine. That was not for some ulterior motive. That wasn't for some underhanded purpose. That wasn't to help Tyrion. It was legitimately to help Jaime. His older brother is now in a very difficult position in his life where he feels like his main purpose is now gone, and he does not cut this. He just doesn't cut it anymore. No pun intended. He doesn't cut it anymore. He doesn't have it anymore. Physically, he just can't do it. And Tyrion sees that, and he relates, and he's like, no, you can. I'm going to show you how. I'm going to provide you with someone who can teach you to become a left-handed sword fighter. Loved it. Loved it. And the fact that Jaime took it unconditionally, that's one of those rare moments where it's like, yeah, this is legit. All right, so now that that's out of the way, let me talk about Jaime's little exchanges during the Purple Wedding. First off, his okay, I gotta talk about his exchange with Loras And I have to talk about Cersei's exchange with Brienne in the same context, because what was illustrated in both those scenes, in both those conversations, was that despite whatever conflict the twins are having amongst themselves, whatever animosity Cersei might hold for Jaime, or whatever spite he might hold for her for said animosity, and he's well within his rights to be, as I said last week, he was in the right, she was in the wrong, she shouldn't have picked that fight with him. You could see that they still covet each other. It's clear. I mean, he's very subtly threatened Loras. Now, of course, Loras is the type where he's not just going to take that. She's like, yeah, you know, I won't marry your sister, but neither will you. But I like that it happened because it shows that it's still there. Cersei, on the other hand, her going at Brienne, I do have different thoughts on that, because while it does serve that same purpose, clearly she still covets Jaime despite her animosity for him for the moment. But what really surprised me is that they went back to that whole Brienne having feelings for Jaime thing. Now, I think they only did this once in the previous season, and I commented on it then, because I don't care for them trying to set Brienne up as a potential love interest for Jaime, or even if it's not that, for her to have feelings for Jaime. The reason for that being is because I feel like it goes against her character. Brienne has been introduced to us, and she's been developed to us as a very loyal character, as a very devoted character. We know that her feelings for Renly, or at least at this point in time in the story, haven't waned. She is still hell-bent on seeing Stannis pay for that, and she hasn't forgot it. She hasn't forgot it. She hasn't forgiven it. Now, on the other hand, Cersei points out in said conversation, and here's my thing. It doesn't work without Cersei's line. Cersei's line needed to be in there. When she says, well, he swore allegiance to Renly, then to Lady Catelyn, and then to my brother. So, yeah, your loyalty isn't exactly cemented in stone. And that line, I'm sorry, but that's when it was like, whoa, okay, she has a point. She has a point. And I think that would help Brienne's initial reaction to just stand dumbfounded. It works because she was right, and Brienne couldn't deny that. But going back to what I said about how I don't like them setting that up, because I feel like, while it might make sense, let me go ahead and preamble the statement by saying this. It does make sense. Brienne probably knows Jaime better than most characters in the series. She was our window character in season 3 to really see what Jaime was made of, and she saw it firsthand. He saved her life twice. Talking with him throughout their travels. Hell, she even fought him at a period, and then seeing, getting his whole sob story and seeing how he's had to deal with losing the hand and everything. She knows Jaime probably better than most. So for her to arrive to that conclusion for feeling those emotions towards him, it does make sense. But why it does not work for me, finally wrapping up this discussion on Brienne, it doesn't work for me because I feel like she is more valuable to him as a friend, a best friend maybe. I think that Jaime needs a comrade more than another love interest. He needs a sister in arms, if you will, someone who now knows what she knows, who can relate to him, who has seen the battlefield as he has, who has rode this roller coaster that he's been on along with him, and who can now better understand him and getting his place in King's Landing. She's the only person that can relate to him right now. He needs a friend, not another romance. Now, like I said, whatever the intentions are, by all means, that's up to the creator. And I think that's what Martin wants, considering he wrote this episode. So clearly he intended for that to be in. Not saying it's done poorly. I'm not saying it's done badly. At this point in time, ladies and gentlemen, this is simply a difference in taste. I would not prefer it. All right. What was that, my 30-minute marker? Anyway, now I'm going to go ahead and I want to talk about Tyrion. Tyrion really put up with a lot in this episode. First off, he had to break off his relationship with Shay. Had to just pretty much refuse her outright. It was the only way to save her life, and it makes sense. I mean, that would be the only way he could both save her life and ensure her safety, is to completely separate himself from her. No matter how harsh it was, no matter how hurt she was about it, it just had to be done. Just like Bronn said, you did what you had to do. Let's not mope about it anymore. But then, and this is when I get into the awkwardness of the Purple Wedding. For Tyrion to have to put up with the shit that Joffrey put him through in this episode, I mean, seriously, going back to what I said before, it was like a running joke that just lasted too long. And the fact that Tywin didn't do anything, the fact that Jaime didn't do anything, the fact that Cersei didn't do anything, Margaery was the only one who tried to stop Joffrey. The only one. Twice she tried to stop him. No one else. That's sad. That is really sad. That's downright disgusting. It's downright disgusting. And yeah, and the whole time sitting up there just having to watch that was nerve-wracking to the bone, man. It really was. And now, finally, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and arrive at the punchline of said running joke. Joffrey finally got his just desserts. Yes, that was an intended pun. Yes, it was. Joffrey finally bit the dust. And here's the funny thing about that. Many of you all watching this review right now, many of you all who have been following my reviews this entire time, you all will be surprised. I am not as ecstatic about Joffrey's death as you might have thought. Well, first off, it wasn't a surprise. I actually knew that this was going to happen. A buddy of mine filled me in right after I decided that I wasn't going to review the show anymore. He filled me in. However, I was still a tad bit clueless because he had told me it was going to happen at the wedding, but I wasn't really sure because the entire time I was watching the wedding, I kept looking at the clock. And I'm like, well, there's only so many minutes they have left in the episode, so it must not going to happen. Also, the matter behind his death, I wasn't sold on. Because here's the thing. My buddy told me he was poisoned. And now I'm not so sure. And that's why I'm conflicted about the whole scene. That's why I'm conflicted on it. Because I don't know. We don't know the matter behind his death. We don't know if he legitimately choked to death or if it was poison. We don't know. Now, granted, that's beautifully done from a visual standpoint because the signs would suggest that, yes, he choked to death. Blue face, bloodshot eyes, loss of breath, all signs of suffocation. The bloody nose, however, I don't know if that's common with suffocation. That was the part that really threw me off, was when he started bleeding out of his nose. I was like, wait a minute, I don't think you're supposed to bleed out of your nose when you suffocate. Maybe I'm wrong on that. But see, that's the main reason why the death isn't as satisfying, because it's riddled with mystery now. Now we don't know a clue. We don't have a clue. And Cersei crying foul at the immediate death of her firstborn. Well, no, not her first. That's not her firstborn technically. But her son, her eldest child. You know, just immediately saying, oh, you know, Tyrion did it. He poisoned my son. He killed the king. That's just fucking Cersei being a crazy ass bitch like she always is. That's a blind accusation. it doesn't have any evidence. It doesn't have any fucking bearing. I don't think that there was, think about this logically, there was no sign of poison in that scene. Think about this. Joffrey was drinking the same wine as everybody else. And I'm pretty sure other people were eating that fucking pie before he took a piece too. Because I think Margaery took a bite of it. So there's absolutely nothing at this point in time to suggest that it was poison. It could very well have, he could have very well choked. Now, of course, I can't believe I'm saying this about a Lannister. I do feel sorry for Tyrion, like legitimately, because for anyone, I mean, for them to just jump to that conclusion, it's completely irrational. Completely, if nothing else, think about this. What Joffrey put Tyrion through in that scene occurred all in what, 5 minutes? How the fuck could Tyrion poison him in 5 minutes? He had nothing in his hand, no little bag, no, no satchel, nothing like that, no powder sprinkle, nothing wrapped up in paper. His hands were empty the entire time. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, completely irrational to jump to the conclusion that Tyrion poisoned Joffrey. There's no evidence of it. Now I don't know how advanced their medicine is. I mean, this is a medieval story, so I don't think an autopsy would really solve the matter. But yeah, and I mean, and that's pretty much going to bring me to my final thoughts on Joffrey's death. Another reason why it's not as satisfying as you might think. Let me tell you all a little something about revenge. A wise man once said, a favorite quote of mine, revenge isn't revenge unless the person knows you're the one responsible. Unless they know you're the one doing it, it doesn't count. That's why in all the old Western films, once again, it's funny that I'm referencing Westerns for a consecutive week in a Game of Thrones review. But that's one of the classic thing about Western films. Why when the victim's held at gunpoint, before the culprit pulls the trigger, they always say their name. They always make sure and tell them, this is who I am, this is why I'm killing you. Because revenge is not revenge unless the person knows you're the one responsible for it. That Joffrey's death was not that catharsis because a Stark did not commit it. None of the other protagonists committed it. It really did feel like a freak accident. And that's what I'm going with. It was a freak accident. Karma? Yes. It was karma. Justified freak accident? Absolutely. Maybe even divine intervention. Take your pick. Maybe it was the old gods. Maybe it was the new. Maybe it was the Lord of Light. But it's still, at face value, freak accident. And that's why it's not as satisfying. But I'm glad that the little bastard's gone. I'm sorry. He just showed his ass in this week's episode. At that point, it was like, whew. One final note, and I didn't think I would mention Sansa in this review because I didn't mention her at all in last week's review, and I said I wasn't going to mention her until she did something of significance. But I do have to mention her her instant departing of the scene. That right there makes me suspicious. The fact that the fool, saved her, got her out of there at the very last minute. That brings so many questions into play. I mean, let's go through this. Why did he do it? Did he do it because he thought she might be in danger once Joffrey bit the dust? Did he think that she might be accused? Did he think that she might be charged with conspiring with Tyrion? especially since she was the one who picked up Joffrey's cup. Remember that. And if that's the case, was she? Did he see something that no one else saw? Did he know that it was going to happen? Could he have been involved? And if so, was he involved with someone who was actually there? Or was it a conspirator who wasn't present and just set the things in motion? Because remember, we don't know who the hell sent that pie up in there. All in all, what I'm saying is, do you get my point, ladies and gentlemen? Me just going off the rails with all these questions and all these superstitions and all of this is because Joffrey's death is completely and utterly rattled with mystery. But at least the little bastard's dead. How about that? Ding dong, the king is dead. This damn thing isn't even open. Look at that. Anyway, so final thoughts on this week's episode. Like I mentioned, really good episode. Really good episode. Despite the few disappointments I had, nothing of great disappointment, except for Stannis. He's still licking his wounds, poor baby. Anyway, but all in all, very solid always round. Now, in regards to the preview for next week's episode, I'm going to be very interested to see how this fallout takes place, because the one thing that really stood out to me was the fact that Margaery said something like, I would have been queen, or something like that. See, this is what confuses me. Is Margaery going to lose her spot now that Joffrey's dead? That would seem almost, what's the term I'm looking for? That would just seem ridiculous. I mean, she did marry the boy. He was the king. Granted, the marriage only lasted all of what? A couple of hours? But she still married him. And I think it would be very underhanded for Cersei to just immediately assume power again in the wake of her son's murder or death. Call it what you will. Yeah, I want some answers to see what that whole thing's about. I hope Margaery did not lose her place. I hope that she is now Queen Regent, and that Cersei isn't, because yeah, no, that would just piss me off to no ends. And I'm just gonna go ahead and end it right there, so that it gives me, I mean, just keep in mind, if in fact that plays out next week, you all will hear about it in my review next week. I will speak very thoroughly on that fuckery if that's what happens. Alright, so that is going to go ahead and do it for me. I want to thank you all for joining me again this week. I want to thank the 273 of you who are watching this stream right now. I appreciate that so very much, considering the hour. I want to thank you all for that. For those of you who are watching this afterwards, thank you once again for joining me again this week. And let's see, for those of you all who have yet to do so, please feel free to check out my Season 4 Episode 1 review. It is still available on my channel. Go ahead, check it out. Check out my Season 4 Episode 1 Hangout discussion, the first of many to come. That's also on my channel. Feel free to check that out. And that will be a new weekly segment I will be doing probably every Friday. Yeah, every Friday. I also have a new Game of Thrones segment that I will be premiering later on this week. Keep an eye out for that. I'll probably do 2 of those this week, because I was supposed to do one for last week. So please keep an eye out for that. I think you all will enjoy it. I want to thank those of you all who have checked out and joined the Game of Thrones TV room over at zbox.com. As I mentioned in last week's review, I am one of the official reviewers for said TV room on zbox.com, and I will link it in the description box below, and I'll probably also annotate it. If I can do annotations for a live stream, I will annotate it after the live stream processes. So please feel free to check that out. Follow me there. Follow the other reviewers that contribute to the Z-Box TV room. Really cool people. I'm going to go ahead and give a shout out to Feel the Issues guy, who me and him have had a couple of exchanges over at the in the TV room. Made me feel right at home. Phil, if you're checking this out, shout out to you, bro. And I think that about does it. Yes, yes, indeedy. So, guys, feel free, share all your comments below. I will keep the comments going up until I don't know. I might keep the comments on. Just for this one, just to mark the occasion, since it is a live review, I might keep the comments going. If I decide not to, they'll at least be up until the live stream finishes processing. So please, go ahead. Feel free. And with that being said, this has been Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief. Do not forget the original Game of Thrones reviewer, signing off. And until next time, peace.